Welcome to your lesson on writing an introduction paragraph for your informative essay. What is the purpose of an introduction? First, the purpose is to get the reader interested in what you have to say. Also, you need to let the reader know what you are going to say in the essay. Finally, it's to provide context for the entire essay. Remember, context is the background information, the backstory that your reader needs to know. What are the parts of an introduction? First, the introduction starts with a hook. Next, there's a transition. Finally, there's a thesis statement. We will learn about each of these parts and what they do for the introduction paragraph. Thesis statement. In an informative essay, your thesis statement tells the reader what the main idea of your essay is. It also gives the reader a roadmap by telling him or her the 3 major points, or in our case, the 2 major points of your essay. When the reader is finished reading your thesis, she or he knows exactly what your essay is going to be about, and she or he even knows the order of your major points. As you know, you've already written your thesis statement in 1C. Your thesis statement told the reader what the main idea was, which was your historical event, as well as the fact that it was important historically because of causes and effects. It gave the reader a roadmap by telling that your 2 major points of your essay will be causes of the event and effects of the event. And it gave the order. You will first have a body paragraph about causes and second have a body paragraph about effects. Here's an example for the civil rights movement. Thesis statement. What is the main or central idea of this informative essay? What are the 2 major points of the essay? What do I know about the order of the body paragraphs because of this thesis statement? Look over here. Here's the thesis statement. The civil rights movement, which occurred from 1954 to 1968 in the southern United States, was important historically because of its causes and effects. What is the main or central idea of this essay? The civil rights movement, and that it was important historically. That is the main idea. What are the 2 major points? Causes and effects of the civil rights movement. What do I know about the order of the body paragraphs because of this thesis statement? I know that the first body paragraph will be causes and the second body paragraph will be effects. Let's talk about a hook. This is what your introduction paragraph will start with. Because the purpose of the hook is to hook the reader into your topic, to provide an attention getter that draws the reader into your essay. The hook should make the reader want to keep reading. There are 3 main types of hooks. A bold statement, that would be a very big claim that would draw your reader in, make them want to read more. A statistic. The statistic means a number that's based in fact that has to do with your topic. And also a quote, an attention-getting quote. So, for our essay, we are going to choose a statistic. A statistic, like I said, is a number or a fact. So, the central idea of our essay is to prove that the civil rights movement was historically important because of its causes and effects. So, we need to choose a statistic that is related to a major cause or a major effect of the civil rights movement. Over here, I went on the internet and I found a reputable source, History Channel, that had information about the Montgomery bus boycott. According to the History Channel, about 40,000 African Americans boycotted the buses in Montgomery, Alabama from December 5th, 1955 to December 20th, 1956. Included my source, which was history.com/topic/black history/Montgomery bus boycott. Notice here with my evidence prompt that I gave credit for where I got this information from. Whenever you have a statistic or a quote, you must give credit. You did not make up that statistic. So when you go and find your statistic, you must give credit to where you got the information from. So here's what we have so far for our introduction. We have a hook. According to the History Channel, about 40,000 African Americans boycotted the buses in Montgomery, Alabama from December 5th, 1955 to December 20th, 1956. We also have a thesis statement. The civil rights movement, which occurred from 1954 to 1968 in the southern United States, was important historically because of its causes and effects. But how do we get from our hook to our thesis statement. That is where the transition comes in. The transition's job is to provide context for the reader, background information for your reader, also to smoothly connect the hook to your thesis statement. So context here involves two parts in your transition. First, you need to give historical context for your statistic that you chose. Second, you need to give historical context of the entire historical event to lead to your thesis about the event. So here we have our transition. For the hook, the context for the hook, how can I give enough context or backstory to the reader so they understand my statistic? The reader may know nothing about the civil rights movement. If they don't know about the civil rights movement, they definitely don't know about the Montgomery bus boycott, which was just one event in the movement. I know. Since the hook mentions boycotting buses, I will discuss what the Montgomery bus boycott was and why it occurred. I need to focus on that before I talk about the civil rights movement. So here was my hook. According to the History Channel, about 40,000 African Americans boycotted the buses in Montgomery, Alabama from these dates. Here is my context for my hook. This boycott, because here I say they boycotted, this boycott became known as the Montgomery bus boycott, a time in which African Americans stopped riding buses and taking taxis in Montgomery, Alabama to protest laws that allowed segregation on city buses. That gives my reader context for this statistic. So here we have our hook, we have context for the hook, and we have a thesis statement. Our last step is the second part of the transition that will give context for the entire historical event and will transition to the thesis statement. So here's my example. How do we give historical context? How can I best give historical context so the reader understands the historical event, understands the civil rights movement? How can I explain to the reader what was happening in the world at the time so they understand the historical importance of the causes and effects of the civil rights movement? What I need to do here in this part of the transition. I know. I need to explain what the event was and give background information on what was going on in the US at the time. So what was going on during this time of the Montgomery bus boycott and the other events of the civil rights movement? This is how I would do that. This is what my transition would look like, how I give context for the historical event. The Montgomery bus boycott was part of a larger historical event in the 1950s and 1960s known as the civil rights movement. After the Civil War, African Americans were free, but they did not have the same rights as white people, particularly in the South. Blacks could not attend the same schools, eat at the same restaurants, or use the same bathrooms as whites. During the civil rights movement, African Americans and whites protested against the segregation of races in the South. I've given context for what was happening during the civil rights movement so that my reader will then understand the causes of the movement and the effects of the movement as they read my paper. As you can see, my introduction has a hook. I gave context for the hook, explained the background information of this, and then I gave context for the historical event that I said that the bus boycott was part of a larger event that was the civil rights movement. Finally, I have my thesis statement. All right, introduction and review. First, you need a hook, a statistic. Next, you need to transition by giving context for the hook. What is the background information? What is going on in your statistic? Next, you need to transition to historical context. What happened during your historical event? Finally, you will put your thesis at the end of your introduction paragraph. All right, now return to OneNote, follow the directions to write your introduction.